What do you want to watch?
I don't know. Anything.
Let's just see what's on.
من تحقيق الاستقرار والامن عشان بقيه المصريين يعيشوا.
Hello there. Welcome to Our Lens, the show where we look at the world from our perspective. My name's God of Jane. Let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about Arabic cinema, a wonderful topic. And to join us, we have a very talented expert, Mr. Gurveer Rai. Let's welcome him to the show. Hello, Gurveer. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Survival is a universal theme that's present in much of Arabic cinema. Today we'll be looking at the Palestinian film, Rana's Wedding, as well as the Lebanese film, Where Do We Go Now? And contrasting the theme of survival as well as sub-themes that are related to its portrayal. As well, we will be discussing the directorial approaches and how the location of where these films take place affects how the directors are portraying survival in the Arab world.
Interesting stuff. All right, let's get started.
Rana's Wedding is a film about a 17-year-old girl who grew up in East Jerusalem. And in this film, her father gives her an ultimatum where she has to either go with him to continue her education or find a husband.
Right.
Now, in this film, Rana has a boyfriend who she wishes to marry, but her father does not approve of this. So the entire film is essentially how she surmounts these physical as well as figurative barriers that are preventing her from achieving her goal. So essentially the theme of survival is striving to live the life that you want even though you're in such a terrible political as well as family climate. An important sub-theme that we will look more in depth into is the sub-theme of feminism and how Rana has to oppose the patriarchy in order for her to achieve her goals. We will also look at the sub-themes of independence as well as external conflict.
So, in Where Do We Go Now? We're set in a war-torn country, city in the country of Lebanon. And basically, we've got the Christians and the Muslims, strong tensions between them. There's blame being tossed around that, all these random events that are happening that are, sometimes are by accident. People are assuming that the other group is doing this. And so there's a lot of hate.
Right.
And basically, it comes down to the women of the city to resolve these tensions, control their short-tempered husbands and all the other men who are just ready to go to war, and they sort of have to manipulate them so that they can survive and they remain a unit regardless of what religion they are.
So in both films, the theme of survival is essentially their struggle against the different factors that they have to face to achieve this goal of solidarity, love, and acceptance.
Some of the sub-themes that we can look at inside this movie are those of feminism, right? The women are the heart of the movie. Things like solidarity. They're trying to keep the community together.
Right.
And a lot of this internal conflict that is causing them all the problems that they have to overcome.
The theme of survival in Rana's Wedding relates to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And that is the political climate that Rana is in, and all of the barriers that she faces are related to this circumstance that she's in.
In the case of Where Do We Go Now? We also have a really tense political climate, but this one stems from the civil war happening in Lebanon.
Right.
And so that's really what the women are trying to, prevent. They're trying to prevent it from coming into their town and causing a war within their city.
Right. So in both films, the political climate is the cause of these issues, and it's also what allows for the stemming of the sub-themes. For example,
and it's what the women have to overcome.
Right. It allows for the feminism to be prominent. It allows for independence versus solidarity, as well as internal versus external conflict to really be shown. In Rana's Wedding, Rana has to oppose the patriarchy, and the patriarchy is symbolized in the people that Rana encounters. For example, her father represents the patriarchy, trying to control her decisions in life. Marriage is something that is like a lifelong commitment, and it's incredibly personal, right? It's incredibly personal, very important decision to make. So when it's out of her hands, it's something that she has to fight for, she has to fight against. In the film Rana's Wedding, you will see that there's predominantly male soldiers,
Right.
which
Yeah.
again represents the patriarchy. And they are a physical blockade. They're the physical embodiment of the patriarchy blocking her
Yeah.
from getting to where she needs to go.
In Where Do We Go Now, we also have very clear examples of this patriarchy sort of oppressing women and women actually overthrowing it. For example, Amal's speech in the cafe when she's just, can unleash her rage on the men, and really an empowering moment for her.
يا زعران يا بلا اخلاق رح تكفرونا بالله وبالعيشه بهالضيقه الخرا لك يا حيف على الرجال اذا هيك.
So let's take a second to talk about the comparison between these films in terms of survival. And more importantly, can you find any differences?
Right, so we already discussed how there's a similarity of feminism,
Right.
but the sub-themes of independence and solidarity are sort of opposing themes that are opposites that can be seen in both films. So in Rana's Wedding, Rana has to be independent and she has to be powerful on her own to fight all of these obstacles that are in her way. So this self-empowerment, this independence is what drives her. And as you can see by her grandmother, the marriage official, and
Right.
everyone else questioning her decision to marry her boyfriend, saying that this is completely the wrong decision to
Right,
make,
right,
but
right.
she's confident in herself and her choice of life in life.
يعني خليل يمكن ما يكون مناسب لك. هذه اللحظة ما بترجع، هذا قرار أبدي.
حبيبتي ليش بدك تتزوجي هذا الولد بالذات؟
And we can sort of contrast that to the film Where Do We Go Now, where we can see so much, solidarity between all the women. It's them versus everyone else, and it's
Right.
them trying to stay together, which isn't really an issue, but more trying to keep the entire community together.
Right.
And their strong bond is really the heart of what lets them achieve this.
صعيد مختلف وتعليقا على الأحداث التي وقعت في محلة وردي أعلن مصدر رفض الكشف عن الفتنة المسيحية الإسلامية في هذه
لو انت يا ست سيدي يا
And it's so important to realize how this relates to where these films take place.
Yeah.
For example, in Palestine, because of Israeli occupation and oppression,
Yeah.
Rana's will for independence and
Government?
self-determination, So that is what Palestinians want. They want that independence and that they want that self-determination.
Right.
So that's the allegory that the director is trying to portray. And in the film Where Do We Go Now, it's solidarity because of the Civil War.
Yeah, they're
because
trying to bring the two religions together. They're
Right.
trying to end the animosity between them.
right.
So, Gavir, can you think of any other differences that we can sort of contrast these two films?
Right. So another key difference would be the two themes of external versus internal conflict.
Right.
And in Rana's Wedding, the conflict is external, which is once again an allegory for Israeli occupation
Yes,
of Palestine, because the Israelis are this external threat.
Right.
While in Where Do We Go Now, it's an internal threat because
Very
it's
much so.
the Civil War. The internal communities struggle with each other is a metaphor for the larger struggle inside the country.
So a great example of this struggle that we can see in the film is when one of the mothers, she has to actually shoot her own son. It's a very
Right.
powerful moment in the film. She has to shoot him because she wants to preserve that peace.
ما حدا قال له عليها بالضيعه
عملك شو اللي تخافينا؟
مسرح
So hopefully you can see from that scene just how powerful her conflict is between keeping her son's safety, if she has to shoot him, versus maintaining the solidarity
The
within
unity.
the community and the peace.
Right.
And so let's talk about Rana's Wedding.
But in Rana's Wedding, as you can see by the following clip,
البيت مو بيت اليوم اللي عم بحاول نفري بيت.
the house is demolished while Rana is quote unquote trying to build her own home. And this shows how these external forces are impacting her decision and her self-determinism.
Perfect, yeah. So let's take a second to talk about the directors, right? They're the ones who made the film. It's really their opinion that usually is trying to be portrayed here. What do you think that the director of Rana's Wedding is showing?
Right, so Hani Abu Assad is the director of Rana's Wedding.
Yep.
And I have an excerpt here from an interview that really describes how he sees the theme of survival and the struggle and its importance. So the question he's asked is, are the themes that bind Palestinian films together the same themes that bind Palestinians as a people, a stateless people, together? His response is, we have more in common than that. We have our biggest shared interest, which in our case is our struggle. Our case is our priority and our instinct in that we can't accept injustice. We are fragmented, but still we share a strong culture and language, which amongst the people isn't just a movement, it's also an identity and a set of values that is shared. We can't accept injustice even when it's stronger than us. So in this interview, he uses the term struggle. And struggle, the theme of struggle is essentially a synonym for the theme of survival.
There you go, yeah.
And in all of Palestinian cinema, struggle and survival are so important because for the people of Palestine, really this threat stronger than them is a threat to their identity, to their home, to everything that makes them who they are.
What do you think about Where Do We Go Now? What is Nadine Labaki trying to express?
Right, so Nadine Labaki is once again alluding to the civil war in Lebanon and the importance of coming together as a community in order to establish peace. And that can be shown by the following interview.
You know, there was certain events in Lebanon that led people to go into, all of a sudden, you know, overnight, people go into the street and start killing each other because they belong to a different confession. It has to do, you know, with the frustration of living in a place where we're always on the verge of a civil war. We're always on the verge of something exploding.
What we've seen is that in Rana's wedding and the film Where Do We Go Now, we've got these common themes about survival, specifically through feminism. We've got a little bit of contrast between independence and solidarity versus Rana's herself and the community coming together. We've also got some external versus internal conflict, but overall, the directors are able to express their messages through these wonderful and powerful films. Thank you for joining us, Gurveer.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
That was pretty good. I'd give them an A+.
10 out of 10, man. 10 out of 10.
Thank you.